Hey, Brooke here. At what point are you supposed to start feeling like an adult? Is it when you turn 18? When you get your first job? When you start paying bills? When you finally buy your own house, if that even ever happens? Because something strange keeps happening. People will reach their 20s, 30s, 40s, and sometimes even their 50s and realize something unsettling. That they're still just pretending. Like everyone else has figured out adulthood somehow, and they're still improvising. So why does nobody feel like an adult? Well, to figure that out, we need to talk about how humans build identity. Psychologist Erikson was one of the most influential developmental psychologists of the 20th century. Erikson studied how people form their sense of self over the course of an entire lifetime, and he proposed a theory known as the stages of psychosocial development. According to Erikson, life unfolds through a series of psychological stages. In adolescence, the major challenge is identity versus role confusion, figuring out who you are and where you belong. In early adulthood, the challenge shifts to intimacy versus isolation, forming close relationships and building a life with others. But Erikson's work also suggests something important. Adulthood isn't a switch that suddenly just flips on. It's something that gradually emerges as people build stability, roles, and a coherent sense of identity over time. But Erikson developed his theory in the mid-20th century, when adulthood looked very different. Back then, by your mid-20s, many people had stable jobs, they were married, they owned homes, and they had clear social roles within their communities. You didn't just feel like an adult. Society constantly reinforced that you were one. Today, those markers have shifted dramatically. People are going to school longer. They change careers several times. Housing is much more expensive, and people have children later and sometimes not at all. Which means many of the traditional signals that told people you have arrived in adulthood are delayed or missing entirely, which is totally fine. But psychologically, something strange happens. You grow older, but the moment where adulthood is supposed to click never arrives. Modern life has stretched the transition between youth and adulthood much longer than it used to be. Education lasts longer, careers start later, and cultural expectations have shifted. So instead of adulthood being a sudden transition, it becomes more like a gradual blur, a slow realization that you've somehow become responsible for things you still feel unprepared for. Another reason people don't feel like adults has to do with how the brain perceives time. When you were 10 years old, your entire life experience was 10 years long. 1 year felt huge. It was 10% of everything you had ever lived. But when you're 40, 1 year is only a tiny fraction of your life. Time begins to compress. Psychologists studying time perception have found that as we age, life starts to feel like it's moving faster, and years begin to blur together. And when life moves quickly, identity sometimes struggles to keep up. You wake up one day and realize you're technically an adult, but you still feel like the person you were years ago. There's also another psychological factor at play: imposter syndrome. Psychologists Pauline, Clance, and Suzanne Imes, who studied imposter syndrome in the 1970s, found that many high-achieving people secretly feel like they're faking competence, as if at any moment, someone might discover they don't actually know what they're doing. And adulthood often feels exactly like that. You start managing relationships, careers, finances, health, and quietly wonder if everyone else understands life better than you do. But there's also something deeper happening psychologically. When you were a child, adults looked like they had everything under control. They seemed confident, certain, authoritative. But as you grew older, you start to see something surprising. Those adults were improvising too. Psychologists of metacognition, our awareness of our own thinking, have found that as people mature, they often become more aware of their uncertainty. In other words, adulthood doesn't always bring clarity. Sometimes it just brings a better understanding of how complicated things actually are. And that realization can make people feel less certain, even though they're actually becoming more capable. Which may explain why so many adults feel like they're just winging it, because in a lot of ways, they are. Adulthood isn't a moment where things suddenly make sense. It's the moment when you realize that nobody has it all figured out, and life continues on anyway. Which raises a different question. If nobody truly feels like they're an adult, then what does being an adult actually mean? Does it really mean anything at all? Or is adult just a describing word for somebody's age? Liked what your weird brain just learned? Hit subscribe. And if you didn't, that's okay. As a 32-year-old teenager, I know you're just riding the wave, so no hard feelings.